A wild day at the White House. Good evening to you. I'm Ruben Jones on a special edition of Capitol Tonight from our D.C. studio. We are starting tonight at the White House, where President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy quickly went off the rails. The president and vice president getting into very tense exchanges with Zelenskyy, accusing him of not being grateful for the United States' help. The tense exchanges come after weeks of President Trump strongly criticizing Ukraine and Zelenskyy. Earlier this week, he called Zelenskyy a dictator. Our Taylor Popolars has the latest.
A remarkably tense back and forth in the Oval Office Friday between President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
Everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
Trump and Vance making clear their frustration with Zelenskyy as he lobbied for continued security assistance while his country tries to end the war Russia started 3 years ago.
You're gambling with World War III. And
Yeah.
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
Have you said thank you once? This
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October.
Shortly after the explosive meeting, Trump released a statement on Truth Social saying, "I have determined that President Zelenskyy is not ready for peace if America is involved, and that he disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace." Moments later, Zelenskyy climbed into his motorcade without making a comment and left the White House early and empty-handed. He posted on X, "Ukraine needs just and lasting peace, and we are working exactly for that." South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who is an ally of both Trump and Zelenskyy, sided with Trump and expressed doubt in Zelenskyy remaining president.
He either needs to resign and send somebody over that we can do business with, or he needs to change.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said Trump and Vance are doing Russian President Vladimir Putin's dirty work. Zelenskyy and Trump were set to sign a deal that would have allowed the U.S. to access some of Ukraine's rare earth minerals as a form of payback for 3 years of security assistance. No deal was signed, and the talks have now ended. Through it all, President Trump has spoken warmly of Putin, saying he believes he will keep his word on a deal and expressing a desire to negotiate directly with him. Reporting at the White House, Taylor Popolars, Spectrum News.
All right, Taylor, thank you. The contentious end to that meeting showed us a side of President Trump that we have seen in public, but perhaps not to that scale that we have seen with some foreign leaders, at least in an Oval Office setting. And it also leaves a lot of questions about where the war in Ukraine goes from here. Earlier today, I talked with Chris Cooper of Western Carolina University and Will Walldorf of Wake Forest University about all of this. And here's our conversation. Well, Will, let me just start with you. It's sort of hard to know where to start on this, but let me just get your reaction to seeing what played out there in the Oval Office.
Well, I think, generally what played out in the Oval Office is something that we're not accustomed to seeing by any stretch of the imagination, right? Usually these kinds of conversations happen behind closed doors. I think that probably what happened is that Mr. Zelenskyy came in and probably tried to put his position down, and the Trump administration simply didn't like that. As you saw that with the president, the vice president, and felt as if he was stepping in on things that may have actually undercut the negotiations, which is what the Trump administration wants to do. And so in general, it's shocking in some ways, but not to be expected. The Trump administration really wants negotiations here. And I think they just showed that again, and they took an opportunity as well, perhaps to win some political points at home by putting Zelenskyy in his place a little bit.
You know, Chris, I'm reminded of Trump's first term when there was a meeting between then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senator Chuck Schumer, I think he was the minority leader at the time, and they were in the Oval Office. It got very tense and it all played out in front of cameras. Trump obviously has a reality TV background, so this shouldn't be a surprise, but this is different, is it not, when you talk about a world leader, and not only a world leader, but a world leader in the middle of a war. That is sort of is there anything to compare to something like this, I guess?
I mean, it's really not, right? I mean, I think it is a fundamentally different question. This is not partisan bickering like we're used to in the United States. I mean, this is two world leaders going at each other in front of the entire world, right? Ultimately, with a deal breaking down on live TV, then the president of the United States then puts out a social media post that says that it was great TV and that it was a tough meeting and a productive meeting. And so I think what that tells me is that Donald Trump is getting exactly what he wants from this. And if you look at the early responses from our congressional delegation, that's exactly what it seems to be. You've got the Republican Party jumping in support and saying this was a great meeting. And then you've got the Democratic Party saying that this was a travesty to the Oval Office.
Well, you queued up well there, Chris, because we've got a couple statements to pass along, including from Democrat Congresswoman Deborah Ross, who sent on social media after this meeting. She said, the behavior of Trump and Vance was a complete disgrace and represents a sad day for America. President Zelenskyy continues to show remarkable strength and dignity under exceptionally difficult circumstances. Now, on the flip side, Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards, who I was interested to see how he reacted, he's been to Ukraine, has been a supporter of Ukraine. He said this: Zelenskyy forgot that he's dealing with the master of the art of the deal. Marching into our Oval Office and insulting the work already done to help save his people was a serious mistake. I'm proud that President Trump showed the world on live TV today how America is reclaiming our leadership role. Chris, we're recording this interview at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and as of this hour, I've not heard back from Senator Tillis's office, who I did reach out to. Senator Tillis has been a strong supporter of Ukraine, but has not reacted to this meeting yet. Is this showing that there seems to be significant support behind the president, even though we've seen significant support from Republicans in years past for Ukraine?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it is Trump above all else for the congressional delegation from North Carolina. Heck, probably the Republican congressional delegation from Illinois, Montana, California, New York. You pick your state, right? The Republican Party has been very united behind Donald Trump above all else. And I think you can see that in Chuck Edwards' statement that you just read. I mean, here he references The Art of the Deal. He references Donald Trump's book in this statement. And then I think, as you said very well, the thing we all want to see is, how does Tom Tillis react? I think we all know how Ted Budd is likely to react, which is to double down on Donald Trump. Tom Tillis is perhaps the only question mark in the entire United States Senate.
Will, if you're Russian President Vladimir Putin, and you're watching that meeting, what are you thinking?
No, I think you're loving this, right? I mean, this is exactly, as a matter of fact, there's been some commentary coming out of Moscow already supportive of the fact that, finally Zelenskyy gets a slap down in the White House, in the Oval Office. So I think they're loving this. I think they're excited about the terms of the deal that could be shaping up here to their advantage. The more that Donald Trump weakens Zelenskyy, then the better it makes the Russians feel. I think it probably makes the Russians essentially adopt stiffer terms at the negotiating table potentially. So I think this is something that the Russians are probably salivating over.
So we've seen since this meeting happened, Will, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has been tweeting out, retweeting different leaders from around the world who have been expressing support for Ukraine. He retweets them and says, thank you for your support, thank you for your support. How is this going to play out in Europe, which has been very pro-Ukraine for the most part? And what does this mean for European-U.S. relations? We just saw the French president here. We saw the UK prime minister here as well.
I think this is probably devastating for the Europeans in a lot of ways to see this happen. I think it confirms maybe a little bit of what they expected with Donald Trump, which was that Trump would sort of go his own way, separate from Europe somewhat. I think the Europeans, perhaps, one of the positives here could be that the Europeans now will recognize that, look, in terms of what comes next in sort of post-war security for Ukraine, that they're going to have to be the ones to carry the water on this. That's something that that Donald Trump wants them to sort of step up and do. But I think you're probably looking at this as probably being pretty damaging to U.S.-European relations in ways that, again, for Trump, he likes this. It's the shock factor and the opportunity to reset the table a little bit.
We'll only got about 15 seconds left, but real quick, the other headline from this is that we did not get a mineral deal out of this meeting with Zelenskyy and Trump. How noteworthy is that?
Well, I mean, I think that is probably something that could be revived. I mean, this is something that both sides want. I think, that once things cool down a little bit, I think there's a chance that ends up back on the table and the two sides sign this. This is something that Donald Trump really wants and that he has put a lot of energy into. So I think that's something that will probably come back, but it may take a little while.
Wake Forest Professor Will Walldorf, Western Carolina University Professor Chris Cooper. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time. A lot more to come on this. We're going to hear over the weekend and throughout the coming weeks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.